Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, nationwide protests in Israel, society divided on how to end the war and the message that could send, while Hamas claims interest in a ceasefire deal. Plus, the two faces of Qatar, Muslim extremism and benevolent philanthropy, and division in the ranks of MAGA, caused by differences over support for Israel, and CBN Israel helping those in need in Beersheba. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Reports are indicating that Hamas accepted a proposal calling for a 60-day ceasefire and the return of Israeli hostages. This comes days after nationwide protests and rallies in which some Israelis demanded an end to the war in Gaza, while others, including some soldiers and hostage families, stated that the protests send the wrong message to Hamas. Here's how this week has unfolded.
At a mass rally in Tel Aviv Sunday night, some hostage families pleaded with President Trump to help end the war and free the hostages.
We now rise to save the hostages, the soldiers. We demand a comprehensive and applicable deal and the end of the war. We demand what we deserve, our children, and we will continue to demand until we get all of them back.
Hamas released footage of Zangauker's son, Matan, who pleaded for his life. Some believe Hamas timed the release of Matan's video to stir the emotions of the nation. During the day, organizers launched a nationwide strike to shut the country down. Police arrested dozens of protesters after they blocked main highways. But family members of those killed on October 7th told Israeli radio the protests play into the hands of Hamas. One family member said, "When we go out into the streets like this, Hamas sees us falling apart from within. For a comprehensive deal, Hamas needs to be on its knees." Another said the protests sow division. The more we escalate the struggle in this way, the more we will push the country into total chaos. And in my view, we will achieve nothing except terrible division among us. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said ending the war would serve Hamas.
Today, those who call for an end to the war without defeating Hamas are not only hardening Hamas's position and delaying the release of our hostages, they are also ensuring that the horrors of October 7 will be repeated over and over again, and that our sons and daughters will have to fight over and over again in an endless war.
IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir announced the IDF is preparing the next phase of the war. First, to move the people of Gaza City south to safety, and then encircle the city to defeat Hamas. 100,000 reservists have been called up for the offensive.
Hamas says it has agreed to the latest ceasefire hostage proposal as talks in the Middle East pick up steam. The IDF Chief of Staff is calling it a, quote, turning point in the war. But Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears to be taking a wait-and-see approach as the IDF continues its plans for the takeover of Gaza City.
I spoke with the defense minister and the IDF about our plans regarding Gaza City and the completion of our missions. And like you, I hear the reports in the media, and from them you can be impressed by one thing: Hamas is under immense pressure.
The Qatari Prime Minister met with Hamas and Egyptian mediators on a proposal that would include a 60-day truce, the release of 10 living Israeli hostages in exchange for the release of 200 Palestinian prisoners, the return of all remaining dead Israeli hostages in exchange for 10 Palestinian bodies, the temporary halt of an IDF offensive, and the formulation of a committee to govern Gaza.
Hamas, for the first time, after weeks of not being willing to discuss any deal to release hostages, even though Turkey had already approached it and Qatar had already approached it, suddenly it is on the table. The reason is clear and we see it now in discussion. Only their fear that we seriously intend to occupy Gaza. Facing this alternative, they are willing to discuss.
The new ceasefire plan is very similar to U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff's proposal that fell apart earlier this summer. President Trump shares Netanyahu's skepticism. He took to Truth Social, posting, "We will only see the return of the remaining hostages when Hamas is confronted and destroyed." The The sooner this takes place, the better the chance of success will be. While Hamas is under pressure from world leaders, Netanyahu is facing pressure at home. Another massive protest in Tel Aviv calling for the end of the war in Gaza is scheduled for this weekend. In Jerusalem, Paul Petit, CBN News.
The tiny Persian Gulf Emirate of Qatar spends billions of dollars to win America's trust and the influence of U.S. politicians and future leaders. While Qatar is an ally of terrorist groups and rogue nations, its money and lobbying still reach the top of the U.S. government. Dale Hurd has the story.
You might think, based on the warm relationship between Washington and Qatar, that this wealthy Gulf nation, awash in natural gas, is an outpost of democracy. After all, the country hosts the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. It will also be the home to a new Trump International Golf Course and has given the White House a $400 million 747 jetliner. However, Qatar is basically a kingdom, and according to critics, no defender of Western values.
Qatar is the opposite of all that. Qatar is an Islamist ideological emirate that seeks in every single step of its activities to promote jihad.
Yigal Carmon leads the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, and he says Qatar is a hub of Muslim extremism and a major source of international terrorism.
They do it in what you would call, on the one hand, soft power, using their immense wealth, but also by hard power, by supporting every jihadist movement on the face of the planet.
The laundry list is a long one. The mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was a Qatari government employee. Qatar has long sponsored the Muslim Brotherhood, which seeks a worldwide Islamic government. Qatar finances and hosts Hamas and has backed Palestinian terrorism. It has strong ties with Iran and the Taliban, and it broadcasts anti-Semitism and lies about Israel as well as anti-American propaganda through its global TV channel Al Jazeera. There have also been reports Qatar funds terrorists in Africa who kill Christians. On October 7th, Qatar blamed Israel for the Hamas massacre. And when Israel killed the mastermind behind the attack, Yahya Sinwar, the mother of Qatar's emir, in a now deleted post on X, wrote that Sinwar will live on and Israel will be gone.
This is the emir of Qatar and the former commander of Hamas. Look at the smiles of love in the faces. For them, the elimination of Israel is the core belief.
An Islamic nation that hates Israel and supports terrorism might not sound surprising, but Qatari influence runs deep in Washington and within the Trump administration. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff, and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin have either lobbied for Qatar, worked for firms that did, or had a business relationship with the emirate. Last month, former Education Secretary Bill Bennett also registered as a lobbyist for Qatar. His stated role will be to say that the $6 billion Qatar has given to U.S. higher education is not for the purpose of spreading Islamic radicalism. Qatar has spent almost $100 billion to curry favor with the White House, Congress, academia, think tanks, and corporations. It also bought influence in previous administrations.
There are plenty of nations trying to cozy up to Washington and using money to do it. The question is, what does Qatar want in return?
Natalie Icano, a senior research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, says Qatar wants to be both arsonist and firefighter.
What that means is that Qatar sponsors a host of terrorist and extremist groups. Think Hamas, think the Taliban. So that's the arsonist part. The firefighter part is Qatar coming in and positioning itself as an indispensable peace broker, stability broker in all corners of the world.
Icano says what Qatar seems to want with its money is U.S. protection and a privileged position in policy decisions.
When Qatar engages in more adversarial behaviors, let's say, so sponsoring Hamas, hosting the Taliban, engaging in corruption. Western policymakers aren't necessarily going to hold Qatar accountable to that because they have this close relationship, because they're predisposed to see Qatar in a favorable light.
Qatar did sign a declaration last month condemning Hamas and calling on it to relinquish control of Gaza. Is this a sign of change? Qatar's embassy in Washington did not respond to our request for answers. Carmon, the counterterrorism advisor to two Israeli prime ministers, said America is being fooled. When asked about the 747 being given to the U.S. by Qatar, President Trump suggested he'd be stupid to turn down a free, very expensive airplane. But if nothing is free in geopolitics, the price of the plane and the billions being dumped on Washington is more Qatari influence. As the tiny emirate, which sees itself as the true seat of radical Islam, hopes to leverage its close relationship with the United States. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
The MAGA movement that propelled Donald Trump to office has been rumbling recently. First came the division over the Epstein files, and now there seems to be an emerging split when it comes to America's support for Israel. CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, has the story.
America's support for Israel has always been strong, and overall, while it still is, some far-right high-profile influencers have taken a hard turn against the Jewish state.
Everything they're doing is demonic. I want nothing to do with it. I will never support Israel into the future after what they've done to these children, the starvation campaign. I don't care.
Others, like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, want America out of Israel's affairs. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of MAGA's biggest voices in Congress, has called what's happening in Gaza genocide. Poll numbers also seem to suggest a slight drop in Israeli support among the GOP. 15 years ago, in 2010, Republican support for Israel stood at 85%. Today it's still strong, yet down to 75%. The more alarming statistic among Republicans today is that 37% have a negative view of the Jewish state. That's up 10% from just 2022, when it was 27%. Part of what's driving some of this MAGA division is coming from younger voters. It's a generation that is much more wary of international conflicts and has bought into President Trump's non-interventionist approach. For example, while 72% of Republicans overall believe America's military should support Israel, only 32% of Gen Z Trump voters feel that way. Julian Becerra, a conservative influencer on TikTok, agrees.
We need to invest in the United States first. And I think it's hypocritical of conservatives to say, yes, we're for deportations. We want to, build a wall, seal up the border, to put America first, but also say, hold on, because it's Israel, let's go ahead and send them billions of dollars.
It's part of a free-thinking mindset fueled by the powerful social media landscape.
I think the younger demographic, which has access to the social media and understands that platform, can hear the different opposing views, and they're starting to make up their mind and not just have that blind support for it.
While that's true, there are plenty of young conservatives who are pushing back. 19-year-old Breland Hollyhand works with the RNC to get out the Gen Z vote.
I think that that's a fringe that has gotten really loud. It certainly doesn't represent the vast majority of MAGA that I talk to, specifically on college campuses, just from my perspective. For me specifically, this support of Israel isn't a political stance, it's a biblical stance. And it's very clear, repeatedly throughout the Bible that those that bless Israel, the Lord will bless them. That's not something that is old or false or dated. That is still a truth here in 2025.
What's also true in 2025 is a MAGA movement trying to understand where Israel fits into an America First agenda. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
We're back in the studio with John Wagge, CBN senior editor. John, your reaction to the story?
Yeah, there's a lot to process in that short story, Chris. And one of the things that struck me is that the wisest words came from the 19-year-old in the story, the young man who said, this isn't a political battle, this is a spiritual battle. And this is the kind of story where the politicians, the Washington types will poll it forever to find out what's going on. And it is a disturbing thing that support among the right, among the MAGA movement has fallen. But it's hopeful also that this 19-year-old, there's hope for the younger generation to actually get a clue about what this is about. And, I think of the scripture from Isaiah, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. To call a battle against a death cult that has massacred more than 1,200 of your citizens, and then they've lost soldiers in the process, and then call that entity, the Israeli military, demonic, and leave the death cult to just be part of the poor Palestinian population, is really untenable. And I think most of the people who support President Trump know that, and I think most of the people who support President Trump also know it's a spiritual battle, first and foremost. When it comes to the attacks on Israel, the prophets have foretold it for millennia that this is what was going to happen, and so it extends the plumb line to the world to decide which side you will choose, basically.
Plumb line, that's a great word. Do you think we are seeing a division not only within the MAGA movement, but nations themselves that are turning against Israel?
Absolutely, and that's what we're seeing, is the United Nations turning against Israel, the nations of Europe calling for a Palestinian state at the very time when Hamas is about to be finished off. It's, to describe the situation in Gaza as Israel's genocide is just so beyond the pale that it's not even worthy of comment almost, except people have to comment on it. We had our own CBN News report from Raj Nair, who was interviewing a spokesman from the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. Those workers, Palestinian workers who work for the fund to distribute 123 million meals, have a bounty on their heads from Hamas. So Hamas is saying, if you tried to feed the people of Gaza, we will kill you. Now, where does that fit into a genocidal act on the part of Israel?
Yeah, what is lost also many times is the fact that the IDF gives evacuation notices to people to get out of harm's way. They text them, they call them on the phone, they send leaflets, and
they're doing that at risk to the soldiers of Israel, and there have been hundreds of soldiers killed in this war, which was started by Hamas. So I think that this is a social media phenomenon where a lot of people who actually helped elect Trump, the 18 to 29-year-old single men, were instrumental in his victory. I think it's just a matter of real prayer for the church to not just have social influencers, but have them influenced by the word and the prophets and what the Lord is saying about Israel. It doesn't mean Israel has to be perfect in all of this, but the Lord has chosen them to live in this land.
Yeah, and so how can people be praying right now?
Well, I think praying for great wisdom for the leadership in Israel, because as these offers come forward to Hamas might accept a deal or they might not accept a deal. There might be a ceasefire, there might not be a ceasefire. The only way to get the hostages out, according to many of the demonstrators in the streets in Israel, is to capitulate to everything Hamas wants. All these conflicting things are happening now on the verge of really a final victory over Hamas. So just pray, as one of our friends recently prayed, for the heavenly blueprint, for the Lord's blueprint to prevail in all that's going on in Israel and the Gaza Strip right now.
Yeah, well, that would be the ultimate solution if we could get that kind of wisdom of Solomon that knew what to do with a baby that was in question.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. Well, John Wagee, thanks so much for joining us. And this is really the battle for truth in our age.
It is.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Have you ever wondered if your definition of widowhood is in line with the Bible? Our next story may give you insights, and you can see how CBN partners are supporting a ministry serving up food and encouragement to those in need in Beersheba.
CBN Israel is in Beersheba right now, which is a city in southern Israel that was really hard hit by the war with Iran. Right now we're doing a food distribution, and you know, the food here is for single moms and widows who live on the periphery, and some of this might be the only food that they will be able to put on the table this week. Let's go take a look.
I'm Mariana Gall. The name of our organization is Streams in the Desert. And we are located here in Beersheba, but we work with underprivileged families all over the south of Israel, from Eilat to Ashkelon. Widows, orphans, strangers in the land. But we take widowhood in an expanded biblical definition that includes single moms. Because I don't know if you know, but the word widow in the Bible does not mean a woman whose husband is dead. It means a woman who lost her covering. We know it out of context. We provide humanitarian assistance and also counseling, small groups, parental guidance. And we also cooperate with many different organizations in the land. But one of our main partners, and have been for years, is CBN. And we do a lot of work with CBN, specifically with single moms. Arik is helping us to find subsidies for different things that they might need. He comes every couple of months to meet with our moms and see how we can help them better. Because of everything our families just went through in the recent weeks, we're trying to support and encourage them, and CBN have brought food parcels for them. Some of them were not able to work and found themselves even in a greater economic struggle. What makes a difference is for them to know that they're loved. So I think some of these groceries actually mean yes, food on the table, no food on the table. I want to say that the partnership that we have with CBN, bringing people together, bringing ministries together with the same vision, the same focus. And I want you to just say thank you for this work.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and that God would thwart the plans of evil men. And as always, that the hostages would come home safely and soon. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.